The massive doors of the Galactic Federation Council chamber opened with a deep rumble that echoed through the vast space. Ambassador Hyun-woo walked forward with steady steps, his black diplomatic uniform sharp against the gleaming walls. Behind him, his aide carried a simple briefcase that would change the galaxy forever. 847 species filled the circular chamber. Some sat on traditional chairs, others floated in energy fields, and a few rested in pools of liquid, methane. All eyes turned to watch the human representative approach the center platform. Hyun-woo had served Earth for 30 years. He had negotiated mining rights that stripped human worlds bare. He had signed military contracts that sent human soldiers to die in alien wars. He had watched his own species become the galaxy's workforce, while others grew rich from their labor. Today, that would end. The High Chancellor Veltar rose from the crystal throne at the chamber's apex. The being's body looked like living diamond, refracting light in brilliant patterns as it spoke. Ambassador Hyun-woo of the Human Territories, you have requested this emergency session. State your business. Hyun-woo placed his hands on the speaking podium. The chamber's translation system would carry his words to every corner of the galaxy. He took a breath and began. Honored representatives, for 300 years humanity has served this federation with loyalty and sacrifice. We have mined the most dangerous asteroids because our bodies could survive the radiation. We have fought in 17 wars because our soldiers adapt quickly to combat. We have built your space stations because human workers need less life support than most species. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Chancellor's diamond face showed no emotion, but several smaller crystals around its head began spinning faster. We were told this was partnership, Hyun-woo continued. We were promised that Federation membership would bring prosperity to all human worlds. Instead, our colonies have become labor camps. Our children grow up breathing recycled air in factory ships, while alien worlds enjoy the fruits of their work. A delegate from the Mordai cluster stood up, its massive frame bristling with natural armor plates. Humans accepted these roles willingly. Your species signed every contract. At gunpoint, Hyun-woo replied calmly. When the Federation fleet appeared over Earth 3 centuries ago, we had two choices: join or be destroyed. We chose to join. We chose to serve. We chose to hope that service would eventually mean equality. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Some species had profited greatly from cheap human labor. Others depended on human soldiers to protect their borders. The Chancellor raised one crystalline hand, and silence fell like a hammer blow. Your species has benefited greatly from Federation membership, Veltar said. Human life expectancy has doubled. Your technology has advanced centuries beyond what you could have achieved alone. Your violent nature has been channeled into productive warfare rather than destroying yourselves. Hyun-woo's jaw tightened. This was the excuse they always used. Humans were too violent, too unpredictable, too dangerous to govern themselves. They needed alien guidance to prevent them from destroying their own world. You speak of our violent nature, he said. Yet who designed the weapons that won the HFY War? Human engineers. Who developed the tactics that ended the Syndicate Rebellion? Human generals. Who volunteered for the suicide missions that saved Federation space from the machine plague? Human soldiers. The ambassador reached into his jacket and pulled out a data pad. I have the casualty reports from the last 50 years. Humans make up 4% of Federation population. We account for 62% of military deaths. 78% of mining accident fatalities, 89% of hazardous waste disposal casualties. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates who had grown wealthy while human families grieved their dead. We are not your partners. We are your slaves. And today, that ends. Hyunwoo's aide stepped forward and opened the briefcase. Inside lay a single document. The original Federation Charter, signed by Earth's first ambassador 300 years ago. Hyunwoo lifted it carefully, the ancient paper crackling in the chamber's silence. Article 47 of the Federation Charter states that any member species may withdraw from the Federation by formal declaration before the full council, he said. Today, on behalf of all human worlds, colonies and settlements, I invoke that right. The chamber exploded into chaos. Delegates leaped from their seats, shouting in dozens of languages. The Mordai representative roared something that the translators couldn't process. A group of energy beings flickered so rapidly they looked like strobe lights. Chancellor Veltar's voice cut through the noise like a blade. You cannot be serious. Human worlds would collapse without Federation support. Your economy would crumble. Your technology would stagnate. Your violent nature would reassert itself within decades. Perhaps, Hyunwoo said, but they will be our failures, made by our choices, for our reasons. He began tearing the charter, slowly and deliberately. Each rip echoed in the chamber's perfect acoustics. Pieces of ancient paper drifted to the floor like falling leaves. You will reconsider, Veltar said. The Chancellor's voice remained calm, but the crystals around its head spun faster. When human colonies start dying from equipment failures, when your ships break down in deep space, when your medicine runs out, you will come begging for readmission. Maybe, Hyunwoo said, dropping the last pieces of the charter. Or maybe we'll surprise you. He turned and walked toward the chamber doors. His aide followed, leaving the empty briefcase behind. 847 species watched. Them go in stunned silence. Outside the chamber, Captain Du Young waited with a small security team. The military officer fell into step beside the ambassador as they walked through the station's corridors. Aliens pressed against the walls to let them pass, staring as if they were watching ghosts. How did it go? Du Young asked quietly. As expected, Hyunwoo replied. They think we're bluffing, or insane. Maybe we are. Hyunwoo smiled for the first time in months. Probably, but our insanity belongs to us. They reached the docking bay, where the Earth ship Indomitable waited. As they boarded, Du Young looked back at the massive Federation station. Thousands of ships moved through the traffic lanes like glowing insects. The station itself stretched for hundreds of kilometers, housing millions of beings from across the galaxy. What happens now? He asked. Now we go home, Hyunwoo said, and we prepare for what comes next. The Indomitable undocked and turned toward Sol system. Behind them, the Federation Council was already meeting in emergency session. Some delegates demanded immediate military action to force humanity back into compliance. Others worried about the economic impact of losing human labor. A few wondered if the humans might actually survive on their own. As the ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, a message raced ahead of them through the galaxy's communication networks. The human colonies had to be warned. The recall had to begin. And Earth had to prepare for the storm that was surely coming. In the depths of space, other ships picked up the transmission. Merchant vessels whose crews had grown to respect their human partners. military commanders who had fought beside, human soldiers, scientists who had worked with human researchers. The news spread like ripples in a vast pond. Humanity had chosen freedom over security, independence over prosperity, the unknown over the familiar. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Dr. Somin stared at the message screen, reading the words for the third time. The text was simple and direct. All human personnel are ordered to return to Sol system immediately. The Federation Charter has been dissolved. This is not a drill. Around her, the Kepler research station hummed with activity. Alien scientists from 12 different species worked in the laboratories she had helped design. The medical breakthroughs they had achieved together would save millions of lives across the galaxy. Her research on adaptive genetics had revolutionized treatment for 17 different types of space-borne diseases. Now she had to walk away from it all. Her assistant, a Vexkai named Torkan, approached with his usual nervous energy. The insect-like being's compound eyes reflected her image dozens of times as he spoke. Dr. Somin, you cannot be serious about leaving. The protein synthesis project is only weeks from completion. We need your expertise on human cellular structures. Somin began packing her personal research into a secure container. Years of work, countless late nights, breakthrough moments that had made her career. I'm sorry, Torkan. I have to go. But your government cannot simply recall all human scientists. The medical implications alone. My government can do whatever they want, Somin interrupted. That's what independence means. She sealed the container and activated its security protocols. No alien hands would touch her research now. The Vexkai watched in dismay as she deleted files from the station's central computer. Decades of accumulated data vanished with each keystroke. Please, Torkan begged. At least leave us the cancer treatment protocols. The Mordai colony ships desperately need— No. Somin's voice was firm. Everything human leaves with us. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on thousands of Federation installations. In the Titan's Tier's asteroid belt, mining foremen. Kiwan supervised the complete evacuation of the richest quantum crystal deposits in known space. His crews had spent 5 years boring tunnels through solid rock, establishing mining platforms in zero gravity, and developing extraction techniques that tripled productivity. The alien overseers begged him to reconsider. The Federation's economy depended on those crystals to power their faster-than-light drives. Without human miners, the dangerous work would take 3 times longer and cost 10 times more. Kiwan had lost 43 workers to mining accidents in those 5 years. The Federation safety regulations were written for species that didn't need to work in such harsh conditions. Human lives were considered acceptable losses for higher production quotas. Pack everything, he told his crew chiefs. Every tool, every piece of equipment, every spare part. If we built it, we take it. The massive mining platforms were loaded onto transport ships. Drilling equipment that had taken years to install was carefully dismantled and secured. The aliens watched helplessly as their most productive facility was stripped bare in a matter of days. Engineer Tae-ho faced a different kind of pressure at the Dyson Sphere construction project. The massive structure would eventually surround an entire star, capturing its energy to power half the Federation. Human engineering expertise had solved problems that had stumped alien scientists for decades. Project Director Velnath, a crystalline being similar to the Chancellor, confronted him in the construction bay. Your withdrawal will set this project back by decades. Billions of beings across the galaxy will suffer energy shortages. Tejo gestured at the half-completed sphere sections floating in space around them. Then maybe you should have treated us as partners instead of employees. We can offer better terms, Velnoth said desperately. Higher wages, better living conditions, representation on the project board. Too late. Tejo activated his personal communicator. All human teams begin immediate evacuation procedures. Authorization code Tejo 77 Alpha. Throughout the construction site, human workers began shutting down their equipment. The advanced welding systems they had developed went offline. The structural analysis computers they had programmed stopped processing data. The gravity manipulation technology they had perfected powered down. Velnoth watched in horror as the project ground to a halt. Without human expertise, the Dyson sphere would remain a dream for centuries to come. Master Shipwright Hai-Jin commanded the largest human evacuation of all. The orbital shipyards around Federation capital produced the fleet that protected known space. Her revolutionary hull designs had made Federation vessels nearly indestructible. Her defensive systems had prevented countless military disasters. The shipyard employed 500,000 beings from dozens of species. Humans made up only 8% of the workforce, but they held every critical engineering position. When they left, the entire operation would collapse. Admiral Krevdan himself came to negotiate with her. The Mordai war leader's scarred face showed the strain of recent battles. You must understand the military implications. Without new ships, our borders become vulnerable. The machine plague could return. Pirate fleets will raid civilian colonies. Hai-Jin continued supervising the loading of equipment onto human transport vessels. The Federation has plenty of ships already. Use them wisely. We need your expertise to maintain them, Krevdan said. Human-designed systems require human technicians. You should have thought of that before treating us as expendable labor. The Admiral's fists clenched. His species respected strength above all else, and he was watching the Federation's military strength evaporate. This is madness. Humans will suffer as much as anyone when the galaxy destabilizes. Hai-Jin finally looked at him directly. Maybe, but we'll face that suffering as free beings, not as slaves. The evacuation continued day and night. Human families packed their belongings into cargo containers. Children who had never seen Earth prepared for a journey to a world they knew only from stories. Elderly humans who had spent their entire careers in Federation service wondered if they would live to see their homeworld again. Not all aliens supported the Federation's policies. Some had worked closely with humans for decades and had grown to respect their determination and ingenuity. Torkan helped So-Min pack her laboratory equipment, even though he knew he was dismantling his own career. Other alien scientists offered to join the human exodus, but were politely refused. This has to be our choice, So-Min explained. Humans have to prove they can survive independently. We can't do that if we're still depending on alien expertise. The Federation government tried various tactics to stop the evacuation. They offered massive pay increases, better working conditions, and promises of political representation. When bribery failed, they tried legal challenges claiming that humans were stealing Federation property by taking their expertise and equipment. The humans ignored every attempt at negotiation. Their orders were clear. Return to Sol system immediately, bringing nothing that belonged to the Federation, but taking everything they had created through their own labor. Some Federation officials suggested using military force to prevent the evacuation. The idea was quickly abandoned when intelligence reports revealed the scope of human involvement in Federation defense systems. Humans had designed the security protocols for most military installations. They had programmed the targeting systems for planetary defense networks. They had trained the crews that operated critical weapons platforms. Any attempt to use force against human evacuees would immediately cripple the Federation's ability to defend itself. As the weeks passed, the economic impact became clear. Trade routes that depended on human-maintained equipment began failing. Factories designed by human engineers could not be operated by alien workers. Mining operations shut down when their human-built machinery broke down, and no one knew how to repair it. The Federation had spent 3 centuries becoming completely dependent on human labor and expertise. Now they were learning the true cost of that dependence. On Earth, receiving stations worked around the clock to process the returning evacuees. Ships arrived daily, carrying humans who had been born on distant worlds and had never breathed natural air. Integration centers helped families adjust to gravity, weather, and the strange sensation of living on a planet that belonged entirely to their own species. Somin stood on the observation deck of her transport ship as it approached Earth's orbital stations. The blue and green world filled the view screen, its surface unmarked by the industrial complexes that covered most Federation planets. For the first time in her career, she would be working with only human colleagues, solving only human problems, answering only to human authority. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Behind them, the Federation counted the cost of human withdrawal. Critical systems failed daily. Economic output dropped by 40% in the first month. Military effectiveness declined as human-maintained equipment degraded without expert care. The galaxy was learning what it meant to function without the species they had taken for granted for 3 centuries. And in the depths of space, other species watched and wondered if they, too, might be better off choosing freedom over Federation membership. Admiral Chul Su stood on the bridge of his flagship Soul's Pride, watching the largest fleet in galactic history assemble beyond Pluto's orbit. 2,000 ships from 60 different species had come to force humanity back into Federation compliance. The alien vessels stretched across space like a glittering constellation of death. "Status report?" he ordered. Commander Bo Ram consulted her tactical display. "Federation fleet composition, 400 Mordai dreadnoughts, 600 Vex Kai destroyers, 300 Hilron carrier groups, and 700 support vessels. Total firepower equivalent to 12 planetary bombardment fleets." Chul Su nodded grimly. The Federation had committed half their remaining military forces to this operation. They clearly intended to make an example of humanity that would discourage other species from following Earth's path to independence. War Marshal Krevdan commanded the Federation fleet from his massive flagship Dominion. The Mordai general had crushed 17 rebellions in his career. His battle record was legendary across the galaxy. He had never met a species that could resist Federation military might for more than a few months. Humans would be no different. His first communication to Earth was broadcast across all frequencies. "People of Sol System, your government's decision to withdraw from the Federation was made without considering the consequences. You have 3 standard days to rejoin the Federation and accept full compliance with galactic law. Refuse, and your worlds will be occupied by military force." The response came 12 hours later from Earth's President Mi Young. Her message was equally brief. "We choose freedom." Krevdan had expected this defiance. Humans were known for their stubborn nature and emotional decision-making. The War Marshal had studied human military history extensively. Their tactics were crude but effective, relying on adaptability rather than superior technology. They would fight fiercely but briefly before superior Federation firepower crushed their resistance. What Krevdan didn't know was how humanity had spent the 6 months since Ambassador Hyun Woo's declaration. Every human who had returned from Federation, space brought knowledge, expertise, and bitter memories of alien oppression. The evacuation had been more than a withdrawal. It had been a massive intelligence operation. Engineer Tae-ho had analyzed Federation ship designs for weaknesses. Dr. So-min had studied alien biological vulnerabilities. Shipwright Hye-jin had reverse-engineered Federation weapons technology. Every returning human contributed to a desperate crash program that transformed Earth from a Federation dependency into a fortress. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter had been completely militarized. What looked like empty space to Federation, sensors actually contained thousands of hidden weapon platforms, each one camouflaged to match the surrounding rock. Human miners like Ki Wan had used their expertise to hollow out asteroids and fill them with the most advanced defensive systems human science could create. Earth's orbital space was ringed with defensive platforms that made Federation stations look primitive. The humans had taken 3 centuries of accumulated knowledge about alien technology and improved upon it in ways the Federation had never imagined. They had also developed weapons specifically designed to exploit Federation tactical doctrine. Most importantly, the human fleet that emerged to meet the Federation armada was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The ships were smaller than Federation vessels, but moved with impossible speed and agility. Their hulls shimmered with experimental shielding that bent light around them like mirages. Their weapons fired projectiles that moved at velocities that should have been impossible to achieve. Captain Du Young commanded the lead squadron from his ship Busan's Thunder. He had trained for this moment since returning from Federation space, studying every weakness in alien ship design, every flaw in their tactical thinking. The Federation built their vessels for intimidation and overwhelming firepower. Humans had built theirs for speed, stealth, and precision. The first battle began at 800 Sol Standard Time. Federation dreadnoughts opened fire with massive energy weapons that could crack continents. Their shots hit empty space where human ships had been milliseconds before. The human vessels danced between the alien formations like fighters attacking giants, too small and fast to target effectively. Krevdan watched in growing frustration, as his overwhelming advantage seemed to evaporate. Federation ships were built for conventional warfare between large fleets. The humans were fighting like pirates or raiders, refusing to engage in the kind of decisive battle that would allow superior numbers and firepower to dominate. Human fighters swarmed around Federation capital ships like angry insects. They were so small they barely registered on sensors, piloted by humans whose reflexes had been pushed to superhuman limits through genetic optimization, technology the Federation had banned as too dangerous. These pilots pulled maneuvers that would kill most alien species, their bodies modified to withstand acceleration forces that would liquefy unenhanced humans. The Federation's first losses came as a shock. A squadron of Vexkai destroyers exploded. Simultaneously, when human fighters somehow penetrated their shields and delivered precise strikes to their reactor cores, the insect-like aliens had never encountered weapons that could ignore their advanced defensive systems. "How are they penetrating our shields?" Krevdan demanded. His technical officer, a crystalline being similar to Chancellor Veltar, analyzed the battle data with increasing alarm. "They appear to be using modified quantum torpedoes that phase through our energy barriers. The technology is based on our own designs, but operates on entirely different principles." Krevdan's scarred face twisted with anger. The humans had taken Federation technology and somehow made it work better than the original designers had thought possible. It was like being defeated by children using toys they had built from scraps. The battle continued for 18 hours. Federation forces had expected to overwhelm human defenses within the first few hours and force a quick surrender. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a grinding fight against an enemy that refused to follow conventional tactical doctrine. Human ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts. They would strike at Federation formations from impossible angles, inflict devastating damage, and vanish before return fire could target them. The asteroid belt proved to be a nightmare for Federation forces, as hidden weapons platforms activated without warning, adding their firepower to human fleet attacks. Admiral Chul Su coordinated the human defense from deep within the asteroid belt. His command ship hidden inside a hollowed-out asteroid that looked indistinguishable from any other space rock. He watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction as Federation formations struggled to adapt to human hit-and-run tactics. "They're fighting the last war," he told his staff. "Their entire doctrine assumes they're facing conventional fleet formations. They have no answer for distributed defense networks and stealth strikes." The turning point came when Captain Du Young led a desperate assault on the Federation flagship itself. His ship, Busan's Thunder, was barely larger than a Federation fighter, but it carried the most advanced human weapons technology available. Using the chaos of the larger battle as cover, he penetrated deep into the Federation formation. The Dominion was protected by 6 layers of shields and an escort of 50 smaller vessels. Du Young's ship phased through the outer defenses using modified quantum drives that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The escort ships couldn't target something that wasn't entirely in their reality. The final strike came from a weapon the humans called a reality bomb, a device that temporarily destabilized local space-time and allowed matter to exist in multiple states simultaneously. The explosion that crippled the Federation flagship existed in 17 different dimensions at once, bypassing every known form of defensive shielding. Krevdan watched in disbelief as his supposedly invincible dreadnought listed to one side, its reactor cores dark and its weapons offline. Around him, the Federation fleet was taking casualties at an unprecedented rate. His communications officer reported that 30% of the fleet was either destroyed or disabled. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "recommend immediate withdrawal. We cannot sustain these losses." For the first time in his career, the legendary war marshal ordered a retreat. The Federation fleet disengaged and withdrew beyond Pluto's orbit, leaving behind the wreckage of 400 ships and the shattered remains of their reputation for invincibility. In the aftermath of the battle, humanity counted their own losses. 43 ships destroyed, 237 crew members killed, and unknown damage to defensive installations. But they had achieved something no species in galactic history had ever accomplished. They had defeated a full Federation military assault. The news raced across the galaxy at light speed. On Federation worlds, disbelief gave way to fear as populations realized their military was not invincible. On oppressed colonies, hope flickered for the first time in centuries. In neutral systems, alien governments began quietly reassessing their relationships with the Federation. President Mi Young addressed the human population from the rebuilt ruins of Seoul. "Today we proved that freedom is not given. It is taken. The Federation came to force us back into slavery, and we sent The news of humanity's victory reached the industrial world of Kepler 442b through underground communication networks that the Federation couldn't monitor. In the massive factory complexes that covered the planet's surface, Naltesh workers whispered excitedly during their brief rest periods. Pak Nor, a junior engineer who had worked alongside human technicians for 15 years, gathered his colleagues around him in the equipment storage room. His six-limbed body trembled with excitement as he shared what he had learned. "The humans defeated them," he said in hushed tones. 400 Federation ships destroyed. The great war marshal Krevdan himself forced to retreat. The other Naltesh workers looked at each other in amazement. Their species had labored in Federation factories for 2 centuries, producing the components that kept the galactic economy running. They worked 16-hour shifts in toxic atmosphere, their natural resistance to industrial chemicals making them ideal for jobs that would kill most other species. Like humans, they had never been considered true Federation partners. Their worlds were stripped of resources to feed alien industries. Their children were assigned careers based on Federation needs rather than personal choice. Their culture had been slowly eroded by decades of forced assimilation. "If the humans can resist," whispered Tekira, an older worker whose family had served the Federation for 3 generations, "perhaps others can as well." The idea spread through the factory like wildfire. Workers began sabotaging production quotas. Equipment mysteriously broke down more frequently. Quality control standards slipped just enough to cause expensive delays. The Naltesh were learning the same lesson the Federation had discovered when humans withdrew. When an oppressed workforce stops cooperating, everything falls apart. On the neutral frontier worlds, Captain Jin Ho of the merchant vessel Busan's Dream watched these developments with growing interest. His ship carried a mixed crew of humans and aliens who had chosen to leave Federation space rather than choose sides in the coming conflict. They had become symbols of something new, multi-species cooperation without Federation oversight. His first officer, a Hilran empath named Silkana, could sense the emotional changes spreading across the galaxy. Her species naturally felt the feelings of others, and the growing hope among oppressed populations was like a warm light pushing back centuries of despair. The Federation's control was always based on the belief that resistance was impossible, she told Jin-Ho as they watched news reports from across the galaxy. Now that belief is shattered. Jin-Ho nodded, studying the intelligence reports that reached them through neutral channels. Rebellions were starting on a dozen worlds. Trade unions were striking on industrial planets. Colonial governments were quietly reducing their tribute payments to Federation core worlds. The humans didn't just win a battle, he realized. They broke the spell. Meanwhile, on the Federation capital world, Chancellor Veltar faced the greatest crisis in the organization's history. Emergency sessions of the Galactic Council ran day and night as member species demanded explanations for the military disaster. The Mordai delegation was particularly vocal. General Torgon, his armor scarred from a dozen battles, stood before the assembled representatives with barely controlled rage. "My people provided 40% of the fleet that was destroyed. Mordai warriors died fighting humans because this council assured us they were primitive and weak." Other species voiced similar complaints. The Vexkai had lost their most advanced destroyers. The Hilran carrier groups had been decimated by human fighter attacks. Dozens of smaller species had contributed ships they could barely afford to lose. "The humans must be crushed immediately," demanded Senator Clickstar of the Synodon Collective. "Every day they remain free encourages other species to rebel. My own worlds report increasing unrest among worker populations." Chancellor Veltar's crystalline form flickered with stress patterns. The Federation's power had always depended on the perception of invincibility. Member species paid tribute and provided resources because they believed resistance was futile. Now that perception was crumbling. Intelligence reports flooded in from across Federation space. The rebel group known as the Free Colonies had emerged from hiding and begun openly recruiting new members. Their propaganda broadcasts featured footage of burning Federation ships and quotes from President Mi Young's victory speech. On the mining world of Zerion Prime, the local population had overthrown their Federation governor and declared independence. Similar uprisings were spreading to other worlds where oppressed species saw humanity's victory as proof that freedom was possible. The economic impact was even more severe. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for centuries were disrupted, as local populations refused to provide supplies to Federation military units. Industrial production dropped across dozens of systems as workers engaged in slowdowns and sabotage. Ambassador Yunji operated from a secret base in the frontier worlds, coordinating with sympathetic alien species who had grown tired of Federation oppression. Her network had grown from a handful of dissidents to thousands of cells spread across the galaxy. The underground communication system she managed carried more than just intelligence. It spread hope. Video recordings of human victory celebrations reached oppressed colonies where aliens had never seen their oppressors defeated. Technical data on human weapons modifications was shared with rebel groups planning their own uprisings. Her most important contact was Dr. Yex Tan, a Vex-Kai scientist whose research had been suppressed by the Federation for decades. His work on quantum communication arrays could revolutionize galactic travel and commerce, but it threatened the Federation's control over information flow. "My government has classified my research for 30 years, he told Yunji during a secret meeting on the neutral station New Geneva. "They claim it's too dangerous for civilian use, but the real reason is that it would allow worlds to communicate without going through Federation channels." Yunji understood the implications immediately. The Federation maintained control partly by regulating information flow between star systems. Independent communication networks would allow oppressed species to coordinate resistance efforts on a galactic scale. "We can provide protection for your research," she offered, "and funding to complete the work." Dr. Yextan's compound eyes reflected her image as he considered the proposal. "The humans are really serious about creating an alternative to the Federation?" "Deadly serious," Yunji confirmed. "We're not just fighting for our own freedom anymore. We're fighting for the right of every species to determine their own destiny." The conversation was interrupted by emergency broadcasts from the Federation capital. Chancellor Veltar was announcing new security measures designed to prevent further rebellions. Travel restrictions between star systems, increased monitoring of communication networks, military occupation of worlds showing signs of unrest. The Federation was revealing its true nature. The pretense of voluntary cooperation was being stripped away to reveal the authoritarian control structure that had always existed beneath the surface. This revelation accelerated the collapse of Federation legitimacy. Species that had remained neutral began questioning their relationship with the galactic government. Military units composed of non-core species started experiencing discipline problems as soldiers wondered why they were fighting to preserve a system that oppressed their own people. On Earth, intelligence analysts worked around the clock to track the spreading unrest. The victory over Krevdan's fleet had been just the beginning. Now humanity found itself at the center of a galactic revolution they had never intended to start. Defense Minister Sang Ho briefed President Mi Young on the latest developments. 17 worlds have declared independence in the past month. The Federation is deploying military forces to suppress rebellions on 6 different systems. Their entire governmental structure is becoming unstable. Mi Young studied the strategic displays showing the breakdown of Federation authority. Red zones marked areas of open rebellion. Yellow regions indicated unrest and reduced compliance. Only the core world still showed full green status for Federation. Control. "Are we ready for what comes next?" she asked. "The aliens who are rebelling will need support," Sang Ho replied. "Weapons, supplies, technical expertise. Many of these species have never fought an interstellar war before." "Then we'll teach them," Mi Young decided. The Federation created this situation by treating sentient beings as property. Now they have to face the consequences. Captain Du Young, recently promoted after his heroic attack on the Federation flagship, was assigned to lead the first mission to contact rebel forces outside Sol system. His ship Sol's Fire had been specially modified for long-range operations behind enemy lines. As he prepared for departure, Du Young reflected on how much had changed since Ambassador Hyun Woo's dramatic resignation. Humanity had gone from Federation subjects to galactic revolutionaries in less than a year. They were no longer fighting just for their own freedom, but for the principle that no species should be enslaved by another. The galaxy was fracturing along lines that had been hidden for centuries. The Federation's artificial unity was collapsing as oppressed populations found their voice. Ancient grievances suppressed by overwhelming military force. Commander Dong Hyun guided his stealth ship Shadowrunner through the dangerous void between star systems, its hull invisible to most sensors thanks to advanced human cloaking technology. In the cargo hold, 37 refugees from 6 different species huddled together in makeshift sleeping areas. Their few possessions clutched tightly as they fled Federation persecution. The passengers included Dr. Zektara, a brilliant Vexkai scientist whose research into quantum mechanics had been deemed subversive by Federation authorities. Her crime was publishing papers that suggested faster-than-light travel could be achieved without the expensive quantum crystals that only Federation core worlds could produce. Beside her sat the artist Morcullen, whose sculptures depicting the suffering of factory workers had inspired protests across 3 star systems. The Hillran's empathic abilities allowed him to capture emotions in solid matter, creating artworks that made viewers feel the despair and hope of oppressed populations. How? "Much longer until we reach the safe zone?" Dr. Zektara asked, her compound eyes reflecting the dim emergency lighting. 6 hours, Dong Hyun replied from the cockpit. "But we have to pass through the Rigel checkpoint first. Federation patrols have tripled in this sector." The underground railroad that humanity had established was now the galaxy's lifeline for dissidents and refugees. What had started as a simple evacuation operation had evolved into a complex network that smuggled people, supplies, and information across Federation space. Dr. So-min, now working from a hidden research station in the Kuiper Belt, had become the medical coordinator for the entire operation. Her facility treated refugees suffering from Federation interrogation, malnutrition from labor camps, and psychological trauma from watching their worlds burn. Her latest patient was a young Naltesh engineer named Ficton, whose family had been executed for sabotaging a Federation weapons factory. The boy had escaped in a cargo container and spent 3 weeks drifting in space before a human rescue ship found him. The nightmares will fade. So-Min assured him as she treated his malnutrition. But the memories will always be with you. Use them. Remember why we fight. The medical bay around them bustled with activity as her staff treated patients from dozens of species. Human doctors worked alongside alien medics who had joined the refugee network, sharing knowledge and techniques to save lives that the Federation considered expendable. Her colleague Sung-Min led the most dangerous missions, extracting alien families whose members had joined pro-human rebel movements. These operations required penetrating deep into Federation space, often to worlds under military occupation. His current mission took him to the industrial world of Verkarn, where a Mordai family had been sentenced to death for their son's participation in a rebellion. The family patriarch, war leader Morgath, had commanded Federation forces for decades before his son's involvement in the resistance movement opened his eyes to the system's true nature. "I served the Federation for 40 years, Morgath told Sung-Min as they prepared to board the extraction ship. "I believed their promises of order and prosperity. I never realized that order was built on the suffering of species like yours. The extraction required careful timing. Federation security forces were expecting a rescue attempt and had prepared multiple ambush sites. Sung-Min's team used a combination of human stealth technology and insider information from sympathetic alien officials to navigate the trap. The family escaped just minutes before Federation assault teams surrounded their hiding place. As their ship jumped to hyperspace, they could see the orbital bombardment beginning behind them. The Federation was willing to destroy entire city blocks to prevent high-value targets from escaping. On Earth, Young-Soo managed the massive refugee integration program that had grown far beyond anything originally planned. Abandoned space stations throughout Sol system had been converted into temporary cities where former Federation citizens could live freely while deciding their next steps. The largest refugee center was built inside a hollowed-out asteroid near Mars. New Geneva Station housed over 50,000 beings from 40 different species, creating a unique multicultural society that had never existed under Federation rule. Human children played alongside young aliens from dozens of worlds, learning languages and customs that the Federation had tried to suppress. The sight of this cooperation becoming natural for the next generation gave hope to adults who had spent their lives under authoritarian rule. "The children adapt faster than we do," observed Kilandra, a Hilron teacher whose empathic abilities helped traumatized refugee children heal from their experiences. "They don't carry the fears that we've learned. To them, freedom feels normal." The refugee program faced constant challenges. Different species had different dietary needs, atmospheric requirements, and social customs. Some aliens had never lived outside rigidly controlled environments and struggled with the concept of personal choice. The Synodan refugees were particularly difficult to integrate. Their hive mind culture made individual decision-making almost impossible. They had to learn how to function as independent beings, rather than components of a collective consciousness. But the most valuable refugees were those who brought knowledge of Federation operations. Military officers who had grown disgusted with orders to massacre civilian populations. Scientists whose research had been weaponized against their will. Engineers who understood the technical vulnerabilities of Federation infrastructure. Commander Lixtar, a former Federation naval officer, provided intelligence that revolutionized human understanding of alien military capabilities. His species, the Draknari, had been the Federation's primary shipbuilders for over a century. Federation vessels are designed by committee he explained to human tactical analysts. No single engineer understands the complete system. This makes them powerful but inflexible. Damage one key component and the entire ship becomes vulnerable. This intelligence proved invaluable when Federation response teams began hunting the Underground Railroad. War Marshal Krevdan, still smarting from his defeat at Earth, had been given command of anti-insurgency operations. His forces pursued refugee ships with ruthless efficiency. The first major confrontation came near the Vega system, where a convoy of refugee ships was intercepted by a Federation patrol squadron. The human escort vessels were outnumbered 3-1, with over 2,000 alien civilians depending on them for protection. Captain Haywan commanded the escort force from her ship Incheon's Pride. She had volunteered for these dangerous missions after losing her brother in the Federation's retaliatory strikes against human colonies. Her tactical display showed Federation cruisers moving to surround the slower refugee transports. All escort ships, implement scatter pattern Delta, she ordered. Priority is protecting the civilians. Engage Federation forces at maximum range. The battle was fierce but brief. Human ships used their superior speed and maneuverability to draw Federation fire away from the refugee convoy. They fought a running battle across 3 star systems, using asteroid fields and stellar phenomena to even the odds against larger enemy forces. The refugees escaped, but 2 human escort ships were lost along with their crews. The sacrifice was reported across the underground network, inspiring even more aliens to join the resistance movement. Federation attempts to stop the Underground Railroad were only making it stronger. Dr. So-min expanded her medical operation to treat wounded resistance fighters and civilians injured in Federation crackdowns. Her staff developed new surgical techniques to help species whose biology had never been studied by human medicine. The research station became a symbol of the new alliance between humans and alien refugees. Beings who had been enemies under Federation, rule worked together to heal the wounds of war. Vexkai technicians maintained human medical equipment. Mordai warriors provided security for the facility. Hilran empaths helped patients cope with psychological trauma. This is what the galaxy could be, So-min reflected, as she watched a human doctor teaching surgical techniques to a group of alien medical students. Not ruled by fear and domination, but united by common purpose. The Underground Railroad carried more than just refugees. It transported ideas, technologies, and hope to worlds that had forgotten what freedom looked like. Hidden communication networks spread word of successful escapes and resistance victories. Young aliens who had grown up under Federation oppression learned that there were alternatives to the system that had controlled their lives. They saw that cooperation was possible without coercion, that different species could work together as equals rather than masters and servants. The Federation responded to these successes with increasing brutality. Entire colonies suspected of supporting the Underground Railroad were subjected to collective punishment. Populations were relocated to labor camps. Families were separated and scattered across the galaxy to prevent resistance networks from forming. But every act of Federation oppression only proved the righteousness of the human cause. The galaxy was learning that the choice was not between order and chaos, but between slavery and freedom. In the depths of space, refugee ships continued their dangerous journeys to sanctuary. Each successful rescue was a victory against tyranny. Each life saved was proof that a better future was. Representative Jamin stood before the largest diplomatic gathering in human history as delegates from 37 species filled the main conference hall of Titan Station. The massive structure, built in Saturn's orbit over the past year, represented humanity's commitment to creating something entirely new in galactic politics. Unlike the Federation's imposing council chamber with its hierarchy of elevated seats, Titan Station's conference hall was designed as a perfect circle. Every delegate sat at the same level, with equal access to the central speaking platform. Human architects had studied the social psychology of dozens of species to create a space that encouraged cooperation rather than dominance. Ambassador Velkara of the Free Naltesh colonies spoke first, her six-limbed form trembling with emotion as she addressed the assembly. For 2 centuries, my people labored in Federation factories, breathing toxic air so that core worlds could enjoy clean environments. Today, we gather as equals to forge a new path forward. The Titan Accords represented a radical departure from galactic tradition. Previous alliances had been based on military might or economic necessity. This new coalition was founded on shared principles that challenged 3,000 years of galactic civilization. Jamin had spent months preparing for this moment, working with alien diplomats to create a framework that could accommodate the needs and customs of dozens of different species. The negotiations had been complicated by the fact that many of the allied species had ancient conflicts with each other that predated Federation membership. The Mordai delegation, led by war leader Kolthan, had initially refused to work with representatives from the Synodan Collective. Historical wars between the two species had left scars that generations of Federation rule had never healed. How can we trust beings who think with one mind? Kolthan had demanded during preliminary negotiations. Individual honor means nothing to a hive consciousness. The breakthrough had come when a joint Mordai Synodan team rescued human civilians from a Federation assault on the mining colony of New Kyoto. Working together under fire, warriors and workers discovered they could respect each other despite their fundamental differences. We do not need to become the same, Hive Speaker Zilnex had explained to the assembly. We need only to choose the same path toward freedom. Dr. Somin presented the Alliance's medical protocols, which guaranteed health care as a fundamental right for all member species. Her research stations had developed treatment techniques that worked across biological boundaries, sharing knowledge freely rather than restricting it to paying customers. The Federation charged my people for medicine made from our own biological samples, testified Dr. Morvan, a Hilran physician whose empathic abilities had been exploited to create emotion-suppressing drugs. The Alliance offers healing without profit, cooperation without exploitation. General Sun He outlined the military structure of their growing fleet, emphasizing that participation was entirely voluntary. Unlike Federation forces, which conscripted soldiers from client species and used them as expendable troops, the Alliance military was composed of volunteers fighting for their own freedom. Every ship captain, every fighter pilot, every Marine has chosen to be here, she explained. They fight not because they were ordered to, but because they believe in what we're building. The Alliance fleet represented a new approach to interstellar warfare. Human tactical doctrine, emphasizing speed and adaptability, had been combined with alien technologies that the Federation had suppressed for security reasons. Engineer Tae Ho revealed some of the Alliance's technological breakthroughs, though many details remained classified. The combination of human innovation and alien expertise had produced ships that were faster, more efficient, and far more deadly than anything in the Federation fleet. We have taken their own technology and made it work the way it was always meant to, he told the delegates. Without the artificial limitations imposed by those who feared their own subjects might become too powerful. The Vexkai contributed quantum computing arrays that processed battlefield information faster than Federation command systems. The Draknari provided hull materials that were lighter and stronger than traditional Federation armor. The Hilron offered empathic coordination systems that allowed fleet commanders to sense enemy intentions. But the Alliance's greatest strength was its diversity. Each species brought unique capabilities that the Federation had never properly utilized. Mordai berserkers fought alongside human marines in boarding actions. Vexkai technicians worked with human engineers to maintain complex systems. Hilran empaths provided tactical intelligence that no computer could match. The cultural exchange was as important as the military cooperation. Species that had been isolated under Federation rule discovered they had much to learn from each other. Human music fascinated the Draknari, whose own artistic traditions had been suppressed for centuries. Naltesh engineering techniques revolutionized human manufacturing processes. Youngsu's refugee integration programs had become the model for Alliance society. Multi-species communities were forming naturally as beings discovered they could live together without the artificial barriers the Federation had maintained. Children were the best example of this cooperation. Human youngsters learned Mordai honor codes while alien children absorbed human concepts of individual creativity. The next generation was growing up truly free from the prejudices that had divided their parents. The economic principles of the Alliance were as revolutionary as its military doctrine. Trade was based on mutual benefit rather than exploitation. Technology was shared freely among member species. Resources were distributed according to need rather than political influence. The results were immediate and dramatic. Worlds that had struggled under Federation taxation began to prosper. Species that had been denied access to advanced technology suddenly found themselves able to develop their own innovations. The Synodon Collective's hive mind processing capabilities, combined with human individual creativity, produced breakthroughs in quantum physics that revolutionized energy production. Naltesh industrial techniques, enhanced by Mordai metallurgy, created manufacturing processes that were both more efficient and more environmentally sustainable. As news of the Titan Accords spread across the galaxy, more species began seeking Alliance membership. The Federation's iron grip on galactic civilization was weakening as alternatives became available. Chancellor Veltar watched these developments from the Federation capital with growing alarm. Intelligence reports described the Alliance as more than a military coalition. It was becoming an entirely new form of galactic civilization. "They are offering everything we denied," reported Intelligence Director Krixtal. "Freedom of movement, free exchange of ideas, voluntary cooperation instead of forced compliance. Species that have served us for centuries are abandoning their obligations." The Federation's response was predictably authoritarian. Travel restrictions were imposed to prevent defections. Communication networks were monitored more closely. Military forces were deployed to core worlds to prevent uprisings, but each restrictive measure only highlighted the contrast between Federation oppression and Alliance freedom. Propaganda broadcasts from Titan Station reached oppressed populations across the galaxy, showing them what life could be like without authoritarian control. Ambassador Unji coordinated these information operations from her base in neutral space. Her network had grown from a handful of dissidents to a galaxy-spanning organization that undermined Federation authority through simple truth-telling. "We don't need to lie about the Federation," she explained to her staff. "We just need to show people what the alternative looks like." The Alliance was also reaching out to neutral species that had avoided taking sides in the conflict. Many of these governments were discovering that fence-sitting was becoming increasingly difficult as the galaxy polarized between freedom and oppression. Captain Jin Ho's merchant vessel Busan's Dream served as an unofficial embassy to the frontier worlds, demonstrating that profitable trade was possible without Federation oversight. His mixed crew showed skeptical officials that cooperation between species could be both voluntary and successful. The turning point came when the Zektari Republic, a major neutral power, formally recognized the Alliance as a legitimate government. Their announcement triggered a cascade of similar recognitions from smaller neutral states. "The old order is dying," declared President Colmex of the Zektari Republic. "We choose to align ourselves with the future rather than cling to a past built on oppression." As the Titan Station conference concluded, Jamin looked out at the assembled delegates with pride and apprehension. They had created something unprecedented in galactic history, a truly voluntary alliance of equals. But he knew the Federation would never accept the loss of their empire without a fight. The Alliance military was growing stronger every day, but they still faced the challenge of confronting an enemy with thousands of years of accumulated resources and technology. The Federation's core worlds remained heavily defended, and their remaining military forces still outnumbered the Alliance fleet. "What we've built here is worth fighting for," Jamin told the delegates in his closing speech. "Not just for ourselves, but for every being in the galaxy." Fleet Admiral Myung-ho stood on the bridge of the Alliance flagship Incheon, watching the largest space battle in galactic history unfold around him. The Federation had committed 3/4 of their remaining fleet to this decisive engagement. At Wolf 359, determined to crush the human alliance once and for all. Surrounding him in the command center, officers from a dozen species worked together with seamless coordination. Human tactical analysis combined with Vex-Chi quantum processing and Hilron empathic sensing to create a command structure unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. "Enemy fleet composition confirmed," reported Commander Silkana, her Hilran. Empathic abilities allowing her to sense the emotional states of Federation commanders across the battlefield. 800 capital ships, 1,200 escorts, 300 carrier groups. Total force strength, 2.3 million personnel. The Federation Armada was a sight that would have terrified any previous enemy. Massive dreadnoughts, the size of small cities, dominated the formation, their hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Carrier ships launched clouds of fighters that darkened space like metallic storms. War Marshal Krevdan commanded from his new flagship, Retribution, a vessel built specifically to counter human tactics. The Mordai general had spent the past year studying the Alliance military doctrine, adapting Federation forces to fight an enemy that refused to follow conventional rules of warfare. "All ships, commence bombardment," Krevdan ordered. "Target the smaller vessels first. Force them into a defensive formation where our superior firepower can be brought to bear." The opening salvo lit up space with energy beams that could have powered entire star systems. Federation weapons had been designed to intimidate as much as destroy, creating spectacular displays of force that broke enemy morale before the actual fighting began. But the Alliance fleet didn't break. Instead, it scattered like a flock of birds, individual ships and squadrons moving in patterns that seemed random but were actually carefully choreographed. Human tactical doctrine had evolved far beyond simple fleet engagements. Captain Du Young commanded one of the Alliance's most advanced ships, Soul's Fire, a vessel that incorporated technology from 6 different species. His crew was equally diverse: human pilots working alongside Draknari engineers and Synodan tactical processors. All squadrons implement pattern Omega-7, he transmitted to his fighter groups. Exploit their formation density, use their size against them. The Alliance fighters were a revelation in space combat design, where Federation craft were built for intimidation and overwhelming firepower. These vessels prioritized speed, stealth, and precision. They could execute maneuvers that would kill pilots from most other species, flown by humans whose bodies had been enhanced to withstand extreme acceleration. The first 4 hours of battle went badly for the Alliance. Federation. Dreadnoughts proved nearly impossible to damage with conventional weapons. Their massive shields absorbed energy that could have destroyed entire fleets, while their return fire devastated Alliance formations. Admiral Myung-ho watched his tactical display with growing concern as casualty reports mounted. They had known this would be their most difficult battle, but the Federation's technological advantages were proving even greater than anticipated. "Sir," called out Tactical Officer Bo Ram, her young face tense with concentration. "I'm detecting something unusual in their formation patterns." Bo Ram had been studying Federation fleet doctrine since the Alliance's formation. Her specialty was finding weaknesses in seemingly perfect systems, and she had discovered something that changed everything. "Their ships are too coordinated," she continued, highlighting sections of the tactical display. "Every vessel is maintaining perfect formation spacing, perfect energy distribution, perfect tactical alignment. It's not natural." Admiral Myung-ho understood immediately. The Federation's greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. Their ships were designed to work together as components of a single massive weapon system. But that integration came at the cost of flexibility. They can't adapt, he realized aloud. Their entire formation is controlled by a central tactical computer. If we can disrupt that coordination, their individual ships won't know how to respond, Bo Ram finished. They've never had to think for themselves. The Alliance began shifting tactics. Instead of trying to match Federation firepower directly, they focused on creating chaos within. Enemy formations. Fast attack ships penetrated deep into Federation space, targeting communication relays and command nodes rather than weapon systems. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Federation ships that had moved with perfect coordination suddenly began hesitating, their commanders unsure how to respond without central direction. The Alliance exploited these moments of confusion ruthlessly. Mordai Berserkers, led by war leader Kolthan, launched boarding assaults on Federation capital ships. Their natural aggression and resistance to pain made them perfect for close-quarters combat in the cramped corridors of enemy vessels. "For freedom!" Kolthan roared as his warriors cut through Federation security forces. The Mordai had spent centuries being used as shock troops by the Federation. Now they fought for their own liberation with a fury that no conscripted army could match. Vexkai electronic warfare specialists turned the Federation's own systems against them. Their quantum computers hacked into enemy networks faster than Federation security could respond, turning automated defense systems into weapons that fired on their own ships. The Hilron provided something even more valuable: emotional intelligence. Their empaths could sense when Federation commanders were about to make critical decisions, giving Alliance forces precious seconds of advance warning. "The enemy flagship is preparing to launch fighters," reported empath Morkallen, his artistic sensitivity allowing him to read the emotional patterns of distant beings. "Their carrier group commander is feeling desperate. He will break formation in 30 seconds. This intelligence allowed Alliance forces to position themselves perfectly. To exploit Federation mistakes, every emotional reaction became a tactical opportunity. Every moment of fear or anger in the enemy fleet was turned against them. The turning point came when Captain Du Young led a desperate assault on the Federation flagship itself. His ship's soul's fire had been modified with the most advanced stealth technology the Alliance could develop. Quantum phasing systems that allowed the vessel to exist partially outside normal space. Beginning attack run on Retribution, Du Young reported to Admiral Myung-ho. If we can take out their command ship, their entire formation will collapse. The assault required precise timing and incredible courage. Du Young's ship would have to penetrate the heaviest defenses in the Federation fleet, using technology that was still experimental and potentially deadly to its own crew. The Soul's fire phased in and out of normal space, appearing like a ghost among the Federation vessels. Enemy fire passed through empty space where the ship had been moments before. Point defense systems couldn't target something that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. War Marshal Kravdan watched in disbelief as the tiny Alliance vessel approached his flagship. His tactical officers were reporting targeting failures across all systems. Their weapons simply couldn't lock onto a ship that wasn't entirely in their reality. "All guns, fire everything at that ship," he ordered desperately. "Manual targeting, visual confirmation." The Retribution unleashed enough firepower to destroy a small moon, but the Alliance ship danced between the energy beams like a leaf in a hurricane. Du Young's enhanced reflexes and his ship's impossible maneuverability made him virtually untouchable. The final strike came from a weapon the Alliance called a reality bomb, a device that temporarily destabilized local space-time. When it detonated against the Federation flagship's hull, the explosion existed in 17 different dimensions simultaneously, bypassing every known form of defensive shielding. The Retribution listed heavily as its main reactor cores went offline. Command systems that had coordinated the entire Federation fleet suddenly went dark. Across the battlefield, enemy ships began firing randomly as their tactical networks collapsed. "All Alliance forces, general assault," Admiral Myung-ho ordered. "Exploit their confusion." The Alliance fleet, which had been struggling to survive only hours before, suddenly found itself facing a disorganized enemy. Federation ships that had moved with perfect coordination now bumped into each other or fired on their own allies. The rout was swift and devastating. Federation forces that had never experienced defeat found themselves helpless against an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. Ship after ship fell to Alliance attacks as their formation completely disintegrated. War Marshal Kravdan, his flagship crippled and his fleet in chaos, made the hardest decision of his military career. For the second time in his life, the legendary commander ordered a general retreat. "All remaining ships withdraw to the Rigel system," he transmitted on emergency frequencies. "Repeat, general withdrawal. Save what ships you can." The Federation fleet that limped away from Wolf 359 was a shadow of the force that had arrived with such confidence. Nearly 60% of their vessels had been destroyed or captured. The remainder were damaged and demoralized, their crews shaken by the first major defeat. President Mi Young stood at the signing table on New Geneva Station, surrounded by representatives from 203 species, more than had ever belonged to the Federation at its height. The ceremony marked the end of the old galactic order and the beginning of something unprecedented in the history of civilization. The Galactic Cooperation Charter bore little resemblance to the Federation documents that had once governed interstellar relations. Where the old system had imposed unity through force, the new charter guaranteed diversity through voluntary cooperation. Where the Federation had concentrated power in the hands of a few core species, the Alliance distributed authority among all members equally. Ambassador Velcara of the Naltesh colonies was the first to sign after Mi-Young, her six-limbed form, steady as she added her species agreement to the historic document. "No more will our children breathe poison so that others may breathe clean air," she declared to the assembled delegates. The signing ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy, reaching worlds that had only dreamed of freedom a year ago. On the former Federation capital of Nexus Prime, alien populations watched in amazement as their former oppressors were led away in chains. The crystalline palaces of the ruling elite had been converted into museums documenting the crimes of the old regime. Chancellor Veltar and the other Federation leaders awaited trial for crimes against sentient life. The evidence against them filled thousands of data storage units, records of forced labor, genocidal policies, and the systematic oppression of entire species. Justice would finally be served for centuries of suffering. Admiral Chol Su, now retired to his home on Earth, watched the ceremony from his garden, where vegetables from a dozen worlds grew side by side in rich soil. His granddaughter Ha-Young played nearby with children from 6 different species, their laughter mixing languages that the universal translators barely needed to process. The young ones were learning to communicate through play and friendship rather than formal protocols. "Grandfather," Ha-Young called out in perfect Mordai, having learned the language from her friend Tok'ran, whose family had fled Federation persecution. "Will you tell us the story about the first battle again?" Chul-Su smiled, watching the children gather around him. Human youngsters sat beside young Vexkai, their compound eyes bright with curiosity. A small Hilran empath curled up against a Draknari child, whose scales shimmered with excitement. "The story begins with Ambassador Hyun Woo standing before the Federation Council," he said, his voice carrying the weight of memory. "One human, facing 847 species, choosing freedom over security." The children listened with rapt attention, though they lived in a world where such courage was no longer remarkable. To them, cooperation between species was natural. They had never known a galaxy ruled by fear and oppression. Dr. Somin's research station had become the premier medical center in the galaxy, where the brightest minds from hundreds of species worked together to heal the wounds left by centuries of war and oppression. Her latest breakthrough in regenerative medicine would help beings across the galaxy live longer, healthier lives. Her laboratory buzzed with activity as researchers from dozens of worlds collaborated on projects that would have been impossible under Federation rule. Naltesh engineers worked with human geneticists to develop treatments for industrial poisoning. Mordai warriors donated their natural healing abilities to help Vexkai scientists understand cellular regeneration. "Knowledge belongs to everyone," Somin told her diverse staff during their weekly meeting. "The Federation kept species separated so they couldn't combine their strengths. We've shown what's possible when brilliant minds work together freely." The economic transformation of the galaxy was even more dramatic than the medical advances. Trade flowed freely between worlds without the crushing taxation that had enriched Federation elites. Species that had been denied access to advanced technology suddenly found themselves able to develop their own innovations. The former mining colonies had been the first to benefit from liberation. Kiwan's expertise in quantum crystal extraction had been shared freely among Alliance members, ending the monopoly that had kept most species dependent on Federation technology. Now every world could power their own faster-than-light drives. Captain Jin Ho's merchant vessel, Busan's Dream, represented the new economy perfectly. His mixed crew traded fairly with dozens of species, carrying goods and ideas across a galaxy where profit no longer required exploitation. The ship's holds contained Synodon art, Draknari metallurgy, and human technology, all exchanged freely between willing partners. Business is better when your customers are also your friends, Jin Ho reflected as he watched his crew load cargo at New Geneva Station.